Hey everybody, welcome and thank you for listening or watching the Focus Forward Business Podcast. I'm Sturdy McKee, a business coach and advisor and your host. I am really excited to have my friend here today, my next guest, Dr. Juan Michelle Martin. Dr. Martin is a physical therapist. She's a private practice owner and one of the founders of the Black Female Foundation, a project that helps female, Black, Indigenous people of color business owners get paid for showing up as themselves. Dr. Martin is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and her clinical practice is primarily focused on pelvic health. Thanks very much for being here, Dr. Martin.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a fun time chatting with you.
Yeah, be good. So will you please tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
So I'm Dr. Juan Michelle Martin. I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist. I've been practicing for about 14 years now as a physical therapist. Some in the mostly in the orthopedic sphere, a little bit in pediatrics, and then branched off a few years ago into pelvic health as I had a lot of those patients in my ortho practice that I was seeing and wanted to kind of dive into helping that population a little bit more. So currently my practice, JMM Health Solutions, is located in Atlanta. I serve both adults and children, so men and women and children with pelvic floor issues. I also offer virtual and in-person sessions, and we all know how important virtual sessions are these days with everything going on with the pandemic. So, and that's been something that even prior to the pandemic, I was offering for my clients because I found the value in just being able to meet people where they were. And so my patients have always marveled at how, it was convenient, how it was easy. And, I even had some say, why don't more people do this? I don't know, but I like it. And that kind of started when I started my practice. My kids were toddlers. So a lot of it also had to do with, what worked best from a business perspective and what worked best for me as a mom, because the mom world is a huge part of who I am. And then just recently, a colleague and really dear friend of mine and I decided to focus in on minority women. And we looked at, with everything going on last year, with the challenges, with businesses folding, with the racial tensions and all these different things happening in our society, we were like, what can we do? How can we help our sisters? How can we help our people? How can we help women in general move forward, in business, move forward with confidence, move forward with intent? And we came up with the Black Female Foundation. And our focus is really working with business owners within the first 5 years of their entrepreneurial journey to help them to really level up in business, just focusing in on the things that, make us, the things that make us unique, which although they make us unique, sometimes they can bring the most challenges, right? Those differences, because other people may not be able to identify with them, they become targets. But being able to use those, in a positive light, being able to put a spin on them and build courage and build strength and continue to focus in, and then therefore be able to branch out and build our businesses, build our practices and thrive. So we started doing that. We started our first cohort in the fall and it was really well received. And we started again with another cohort this year as well. So I'm really, really excited to take these business owners on a journey and really watch them grow.
Well, thank you for that. So how did you get started in business, and was JMM Health Solutions, your first business?
So I got started in business. As a clinician, I was a clinic director, like probably most PTs. And, you kind of look at how things were done and you're like, that makes absolutely no sense. And this is like pulling teeth. Why does it have to be so hard? But because, it's not your business, it's someone else's baby, and they want things a certain way, sometimes there can be a bit of friction in that. And sometimes not everyone is amenable to change. When I had my daughter, though, I left the private practice arena. I left outpatient clinical practice and I was in the hospital. And that was where I was transitioning my love for women's health, for pelvic health there, because I was working mother, baby, labor and delivery. And even at the hospital, I was like, we're missing out on so much as a business, as an entity, as a hospital, being able to serve women, being able to serve the people that walk through these doors. There's so much more that we can do. unfortunately, again, dealing with the bureaucracy that exists in larger organizations, it was a little bit of, all right, this is never going to happen. And so it was part frustration, but
Mhm.
part wanting to have the autonomy to do the things that I felt like were needed in serving patients. Being able to meet people where they were, not being tethered to insurance, not being tethered to some specific mandate, and just being able to, be with my patients. So I started my practice. When I started my business, I started it just working contract as a contractor and consulting pelvic
Mhm.
health with other practices. And then I decided, okay, let's do this thing. Let's, instead of dipping the toe in the water, let's just do this thing. And so I did. And again, like I said, my kids were babies, my kids were toddlers. And so I decided that I was going to go about it in a way where I could go to my patient's home. So I was doing mobile, but I was also doing virtual. And I'd done that before, especially when I worked in peds, and I found it worked really, really well for the families. And that was just because in working in pediatrics, you might have one parent at a session, the other parent at work, nobody
Sure.
talks. Nobody knows what's going on. It doesn't matter how pretty the handout is you give them. It doesn't matter if you gave them a video. And so I was like,
Right.
hey, let's jump on a Zoom. Let's jump on a Skype. Let's jump on WhatsApp and see what's happening. And the parents were really happy. So the parents actually started looking forward to that. And some
Hmm.
of them had asked, hey, can we do this? And it was only like 15 minutes. It was just a check-in, like, hey, how you doing? Do you need anything? Where are we
Mhm.
struggling this week? How's my baby doing? That kind of thing. And then even with my pelvic health clients, how are we doing? How are your symptoms? Where are we at? Is there anything that you're finding difficult? Is there anything we need to change? That was it. It wasn't any big to do. It was just really a check-in, but everybody felt cared for. And so when I started my practice, it was home visits and virtual. And there's something about being able to go into the home and see a person.
Mhm.
And just offering them care. There's level of comfort that they have because they're in their own space, but you also get to see a lot of stuff that you can't recreate in a clinical setting. And so then beyond that, I decided to branch out into, having some office space as well so that clients can now come to me. So my practice has evolved over the years, still delivering the same level of care, still being able to serve people at a very high level, and just very grateful that I get to do it.
Very cool. Um, so you gave us a little bit of why you decided to start your business, but do you wish you had done it at all differently when you began?
Part of me does, but in the sense of the brick and mortar,
Mhm.
because let me tell you, driving around Atlanta in the summer, no fun. That heat, no fun. So,
Right.
and and as far as the brick and mortar though, what I found myself doing, I was constantly referring patients out because I had people who were calling me from an hour, 2 hours away, who were willing to
Mhm.
come to me. Um, but I didn't have a physical space, and I certainly wasn't going to drive 2 hours away. So I was constantly referring patients out to other practitioners, which is fine. And truth be told, that turned out to be a blessing because I've been able to build good relationships with those other practitioners. Even though they're within the same niche as I am, and some people get uncomfortable with that because they think it's a competition thing. And I find it's a way for all of us to continue to help people, so that if I can't do it, you know what, but I know somebody who's amazing that can, and I can get them to that person. But some parts of me wished that I did start seeing clients in the brick and mortar a little bit earlier and establishing that. Parts of me also recognize that, as a mom, I needed that flexibility
Mhm.
that I was allowed when I first started my practice. So it's, six of one, half dozen of the other. But all in all,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of growth over the years. So I definitely can't complain.
Cool. Um, when you We'll come back because I've lost my train of thought all of a sudden. No, the virtual thing. You did that in such a natural way, and it's centered around your customers, right? It was what was going to be best for them. So I love that. I think that's um, something a lot of people can learn from and embrace, that if you can better serve them and augment whatever it is you're providing, whatever it is you're doing for them, that's just a really nice. Also, I appreciate the way you did it. not as a big to-do, not as just as an obvious adjunct. You get them comfortable with it, they buy in, they liked it, you do it again. I mean, that's perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
If more people could do that with their businesses, that would just be, yeah. So tell me this, what motivated you a little bit more maybe to co-found the Black Female Foundation?
Well, I'm Black. I'm a female. The obvious. But
Well,
it's
not necessarily for those listening, right? Anybody who's watching, right? We got it.
maybe for those watching, for those listening, just so you know. But it's interesting, the journeys that we all have,
Mhm.
regardless of our fields, regardless of our careers. But as much as sometimes we do try to deny it, and I certainly have over the years, race can sometimes be a factor, and it can play a role. And there are things that, culturally, it may be cultural, it may be, presence. And I remember when, so little things, right? And note to everybody, don't you ever touch anybody's hair without asking permission. Um, I would
Yes.
I would go to work, and people would just, I had dreads, and, so I would, wear it different ways. And I just have people come up to me, is that your hair? And they're grabbing my hair, and I'm like, oh, you're in my space.
We had this conversation last night at dinner. My daughter was like, she was like, this woman, these people at school try to touch her hair. It's one of the things she likes about the virtual learning, because nobody will try to reach out and touch her hair. And just for context, their mom's Asian. She has kind of lighter highlighted reddish hair. People think she dyes it and all this stuff. And they, like, of all, and it's not one group, lots of
It's
different
not.
people
It's really
will
not.
read. It's like,
It's really not. Yeah.
it's your
Well,
personal
what's funny,
space.
it's kind of like when you're pregnant and you walk through a store, and this has totally happened to me,
Oh,
and random people you don't know try to touch your stomach, and it's like, who are you? Like, why are you
my
touching me?
my wife became like a jujitsu master.
Oh my
Suddenly,
gosh. Yeah. I mean, I will say I did happen to smack a little old lady, but it was totally out of reflex. I had no idea who this lady was, and she just walked up to me. And at that time, I wasn't pregnant anymore, but I had my baby, and my daughter was sleeping. So I had her in the carrier on me. She was sleeping, and I had a blanket over her. And I don't know if the blanket had like a big neon sign that said "remove and look at the baby." But this old lady just comes up, pulls the blanket off my daughter. We're in the middle of the supermarket near the back of the frozen foods. And I just smacked her. And I was like, oh my God, did I really? I'm so sorry. But don't touch her. But it's amazing how, and people may not mean any malice by it.
no,
But whether
but
it is whether it's things like that, invading people's personal space, whether it is using terms which they may not even be aware is derogatory, but they are,
right.
um, whether it is making comments that, again, they may not assume are condescending, but it really does belittle the minority individual, because it connotes, it gives it the connotation that, we are not enough, we cannot do, you will never. And oftentimes they start like that, oh, you want to be a manager? Why? You should just keep working as an employee. You're not cut out for this. Really just trying to keep people down. And what happened, Dr. Danelle and I last summer did a panel discussion, and we did it on race in healthcare. We did the patient perspective, and then we did the clinician perspective. And it was really interesting as we were researching this, as we were talking to different people, as we were looking at research, as we were looking at the things that exist. So we weren't, this is stuff we were making up. This wasn't anecdotal.
Right.
We were looking at the stuff that exists, It was amazing, things like the research study that came out in 2018 that stated that, physicians assumed that Black people felt pain differently, and so they assumed they had a higher pain tolerance. So Black people were oftentimes not given pain medication, even when they complained of pain, because it was assumed that they sense pain differently. And I was like, in 2018 though, really, guys?
Exactly.
And so all these different things, and then looking at the staggering numbers of the makeup of healthcare professionals, minorities as healthcare professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting, especially when we look and see that a lot of the people, especially in marginalized communities, typically tend to be minority. And then you look at, they don't have people that look like them. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it can be miscommunication. Again, we go back to culture, we go back to certain nuances that someone that sometimes looks at you can better be able to help and address. So going through all of that, getting feedback from individuals who watch the panel discussions, who love them, and then all of a sudden, all these clinicians started coming out of the woodwork. Oh my gosh, this was my experience at work. This was my experience. These are the things that happened to me. This is what I've been going through. And Danelle and I were like, well, crap. I mean, kind of that, well, we thought it was just us kind of moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we were like, well, this is crazy. And then talking to people about, okay, why do you not want to move forward? Why, if this is the case and this is happening in your environment, what's stopping you from taking a step away from that? And some people have been told, well, you'll never make it in business, or, nobody will want to buy from you. And different things like that. And I remember when I started my practice, I had people say, oh, are you starting it with somebody? Oh, it's just you? Oh, I'm like, is that a problem? I'm sorry, I'm confused. Or, how much is that what you're charging people? You think people are going to pay you that? I'm like, yeah, do you know how much people pay for their dogs and their cats? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that people are paying that for themselves. And so it was just interesting to me. And we decided, you know what, we really want to, especially those clinicians who have taken the step, because that first step into business ownership, into entrepreneurship is scary. It's scary. It's a new world. It's like, oh crap, what if this doesn't work? And I think that that's the same for everybody. But when you add all these layers on top of it, you're a female. So, we look at business and see that business is a predominantly male run, or even when most people think of business, they think of men more so than they think of women as business people.
Just by default, right?
Yeah, just by default, even though now the majority of entrepreneurs are female. So but the mentality hasn't changed. And so, when you add the layer that they're female, then you add the layer of minority, and then you continue to add these other layers. Maybe they're an immigrant also. There are a lot of things that these individuals may have to struggle with that aren't necessarily talked about in your average business course or your average mentoring program. And so we wanted to create something where we could target what we thought were the important fundamentals: mindset, business fundamentals, and then a community, building a community, curating a community to better serve women and minority women, so that as we grow, as we thrive, we can continue to pull our sisters up. It doesn't matter if you're Black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, whatever. Let's pull each other up, and let's go ahead and continue to help each other grow and thrive in business.
Yeah, I love what you said, because I think going out there, especially your first time, for anybody is really frightening. But then you keep adding on these, especially that societal feedback stuff, right, that you mentioned. I mean, we all run into doubts, but you got to be confident in yourself, and getting those questions and kind of constant challenges. For some people, that's fuel, but that's not the majority. For most, that's really undermining. And, that can be devastating to somebody who's already nervous, already scared, already not sure, right? They're taking a risk. So, by the way, if you're listening, somebody, support them when they decide to go out and do their own thing. Cool. So in addition to that, you're running your practice. You founded BFF with Dr. Dixon, who we will talk about later. Or actually, she's going to be a guest in another month or two. But you're also a wife and a mother. And like so many business owners, struggling with all these different demands on your time, what advice would you give? What tricks or secrets have you learned that have helped you to manage those kind of competing priorities in your time?
Boundaries are important. If
Mm,
you have none, get some. They're super important because you have to start creating some sort of distinction between what's work, what's for family, what's for you, because you still need to take a breather every now and again. And
mhm,
I remember the first year doing this, driving all over the place. You got to go get the kids from, my kids were in preschool at the time, got to go get the kids from preschool,
mhm.
bring them home, got to cook dinner. I'm tired. Sometimes I didn't even eat because I would be at the table while they were eating and just fall asleep. I'm like, thankfully, I hadn't done the whole face in the plate of food thing because I at least smart enough to shift it over. But there were times that I couldn't even eat. I was so tired. Or there were times when, I was trying to, oh God, I got to answer that email. I got to answer that text message. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. What clicked for me, my daughter was probably 4, maybe 5. She was probably 5. And my daughter said, Mommy, you're always on your phone. And it might not seem like much because I'm like, yeah, well, my phone and my email and stuff like that's all connected. So that is just easier than using the laptop. But then I stopped to think, like, that's what I'm thinking in my mind. But she
Mhm,
didn't care. She didn't know, right? And all she
mhm,
sees is me and this phone. And I was like, oh, I need to do better. And so I had to start learning, and it's been a work in progress over the years. I'd be lying if I told you it was perfect. I had to start
right.
somewhere though, and I had to start creating boundaries and setting firmer boundaries and really creating time. And so I started doing a lot of a better job of time blocking. you
Mhm,
know, what was work, what was for my family, what was for my kids, what was for my spouse, because one of the things I like to do with them is we do dates. So I'll take my kids on a date. Like, hey, where do we want to do? What is our date going to be? Are we going to go to the park? Are we going to have a picnic? Or, well, we don't go out to eat because of COVID, but do we want to do a picnic? Do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? And they get, sometimes it's kids' choice, but things like that, so that they still feel like, okay, mommy is here,
mhm.
even though I might say, well, I'm not doing anything between 8 and 9 o'clock, don't care what it is, as much as possible, because I can spend time with them. Then when they go to sleep at 10 o'clock, I'm up working, like, okay, I really need to get this done. So it's just kind of managing things in a way that you figure out what's best for you. I think everyone is going to be different. I've got friends that have multiple kids. I have 2, and some days I think it's a struggle. I have friends with 5 and 6, and I'm like, how are you still smiling though? Like, what? How? I mean, I have a friend and she's the happiest person in the world. Why are you so happy? Are you on something? I asked her that the other day. I said, are you on something? You tell me, we're friends. But she's just always so happy. She was like, listen, you've got to be. I live for today. That's it. I don't care about tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, I'll deal with it. And I was like, I like that. And
Mm,
that's her thing. She's like, that's how I manage. And so I think it's just figuring out what works for you and your family. My family is my number one priority. So everything, including my business, has to revolve around them. And that's what I've decided to do. So that's kind of how it started and how it works for us, and how it'll keep going.
well, thank you. That's great. I really appreciate you sharing that. You've said something there, like it's not perfect, right? If I told you it was, it'd be lying. I see that so often, and with just business owners in general. And part of it isn't that they're misrepresenting. We ask how it's going, what you're doing. They don't want to burden each other with all the stuff that's going on. So we all put our best foot forward. We talk about the positives, the wins, but we're painting kind of this rosy picture. And one of the things I get to see behind the curtain on so many businesses and talking with so many owners is that everybody's dealing with some kind of challenge, right? I
Mhm.
got an email promo this morning, by the way. It was like, oh, it'll all run seamlessly like clockwork. And I'm like, no, it won't. It never, I mean, it doesn't matter if you've been in business 10 years or 5 years or 30, there are new challenges and problems. So along those lines, would you mind sharing any of the kind of current challenges that you're coming up against and maybe what you're doing about those, because that just seems to be an ongoing theme in business. Nobody has it fully figured out. And I think it's really important that we hear that from each other.
So I don't know so much if it is a challenge, but at times it has been. So COVID. So even though I am a telehealth practitioner, I do have a lot of clients who either prefer to be seen because that's what their expectation of therapy is. And usually I don't fight people. I'm blessed to have my setup in a way that if they want to be seen in person, they can. And usually what I will tell people is I offer in person and I offer virtual sessions. What I love to do is meet you in person, start to build that relationship, identify what's happening. So through that initial evaluation, and out of that, we can determine what the next best step would be. And so sometimes if the situation is not as severe as we might have thought it was, maybe then we could definitely transition to virtual sessions with probably an in-person follow-up in there. So a lot of the patients I have, that's really an easy way to get them into doing those virtual sessions. Because of COVID, I've waived our cancellation policy for those who have canceled because of COVID, not just because they're like, yes, I'm out of town. You didn't know last week you were going to be out of town today. But versus Jay, we got COVID, which is so funny. The year started, and the first Tuesday of the year, I had 5 cancellations in one day, 3 of whom had COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, coming out of that New Year's weekend.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, that's all right. Get better, get healthy. And the 2 that weren't, they got tested. They were negative. They didn't have any symptoms, but it's just that someone they had been in contact with
got exposed.
ended up testing positive or was in contact with another person. And so they were like, Jay, I said, go get tested. You're fine. And so it's, that in and of itself, it's not something that I can stop. It's not something that I can control. Right. So, trying to figure out the best way to make sure that patients are okay. And usually when that happens, I say, hey, let's go ahead, and just switch it to a virtual session. Let's go ahead and for some people, they're like, will it still work? Absolutely. There's still so much that we can do. Remember last week how we were going over these specific things, or we went over these specific educational tools, or we went over these specific exercises? We can totally still do that in the virtual space. So, it's been having to explain a little bit more to people. You would think that with COVID, more people would be accustomed to that, but they're still not. So it's been a little challenging in that regard, but overall, I've been really, really blessed. This last year, despite all the craziness going on with COVID, because I was running another program, Zero to Telehealth, which helps clinicians to get into the telehealth space. So those who were not using telehealth, help them to incorporate it in their practice, either exclusively or as an adjunct to what they're doing. And I've been doing that since 2018 or 2019, I think. And so when COVID hit, I was like, okay, we'll just ramp up Zero to Telehealth, and we just keep doing that, because I would do one-on-one consults with clinicians. I had a coaching program. I was doing all that stuff. So I didn't, even when patients were afraid to come on, and some of my older patients that I see for pelvic floor issues don't have email, don't do video chat. I mean, I was like, gosh, and here I was thinking all grandmas had an iPhone. But some of them don't do it, and so it's trying to figure out, okay, well, if we can't do that, let's go ahead. I'll jump on the phone. I'll call you every now and again just to check in. And when you feel comfortable, let's get you back into the clinic. So that they don't feel pressured, but, I also know that they're okay. They're doing okay.
Well, yeah, and they feel supported, not abandoned as well. So that's great. So what's one of your proudest moments in business?
Let's see. I think, well, starting the business for one, reaching a year. I mean, tomorrow's my 3-year anniversary. Woo,
congratulations.
Reaching 3 years, because what are the stats? Like 50% of businesses fail in the first 2 years. So when I reached year 2, I was like, woohoo, I'm in the top 50. And just the realization that I can do this, I am doing this, like
Mhm.
that's been huge. That's been huge. Because if
That
you'd asked me even 5 years ago, would you be a business owner? I was like, oh God, no. Who wants that headache? That's what used to be all the time. And I had a friend who started his business about 5 years ago, and he was like, Jay, you should start a business. Misery likes company is what my grandmother used to say. No, I'm good. I'll let you do that. And he was like, no, you should. I'm okay. I'm okay. But thank you. Thank you so much. And
right.
but look now, fast forward, and he messaged me some weeks back, and he says, misery likes company, doesn't it? Hey, company. I was like, well, you might have been right. Go ahead and gloat, but it's just been a fun journey, and I'm just proud to say that I've made it. 3 years into it, things are going well still, thank God. Um, so that's really a shining moment for me.
That's cool. Well, congratulations on the anniversary. I didn't know that one. Um, so what's like one of the biggest things you've learned recently that you wish you had learned 5, 10 years ago?
Hmm. Automation is a heck of a thing. That wasn't a recent thing learned, but it was one of the biggest things learned is automation is a
Mhm.
heck of a thing. If you
What?
can get systems in place that work for you, oh God, it makes your life so much easier. Because when I started, I was bootstrapping everything,
Right.
doing everything manually, which is why it took 10 times as long. And, it was a process. And then you learn how to automate stuff and you're like, oh my God, why did I not think this before? Did somebody tell me this? Do people not love me that they didn't tell me this before? So I think that's huge.
Yeah. Well, and having all those processes, that's pillar one of my programs because so many owners, even when you have to do it, like somebody has to perform it, you want that to be
Hmm.
repeatable and document it and get it out of your head so you're not the font of all knowledge and the source of everything. Yeah, the reduction in interruptions, the streamlining of your own time. Yeah, that's a big one. Thanks for sharing that. Um, so any favorite business books or articles or anything that you're finding interesting, intriguing right now?
I absolutely love Profit First, and I'm going through it again. I
Mhm.
love that book. I think I'm a firm believer. I mean, my family's always been a stickler on personal finances. And so going into the business, I wanted to make sure that business finances were also equally addressed.
Mhm.
And so I found that book to be very helpful. I thought it to be very interesting the first go around. And so now I'm trying to go through it again just to kind of narrow down and zone in on a lot of the things that they've talked about in there. But it's a really good read. Also a really good read is Business Made Simple. I love Donald Miller. His books are really good, and he came out with, which one did he come out with? Oh, Business Made Simple might be the new one. That's the one I'm going through now as well. He had Marketing Made Simple, and then he had the Story Brands, and those are three
Mhm.
really, really great books. Just, I mean, they flow so easy, and the way that it's written, it's like, well, this makes so much sense. Oh, well, that's easy. It's written in such a way, it's almost like all these little mini aha moments, and it doesn't overcomplicate things. So.
Oh, that's huge. That's a huge thing. So yeah, thank you for that too, because so there you have enough complexity. All Everybody listening to this, business owners, you have enough complexity in your life that you don't need somebody making it more difficult or more
Mhm.
complicated. Simplification's absolutely key. Um, cool. So, are there any other thoughts that you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up?
Um, I think for those in business, those starting out business, don't go at it alone. Find people who are already on the journey. Find people who are doing it. I mean, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. Like seriously, even if you think I want to do this, I'm gonna be successful. That's great, very
Mhm.
admirable. Now go find a friend. um, you know, it's better when you're doing it together. It's better when you have people there for that support. And not only that, not only to support you, but if you're doing something that makes absolutely no sense, to have somebody that can say, that makes absolutely no sense. try this. Or how about you look at it a different way? It's not always going to be rosy, and or your critiques may not always be rosy, but have those trusted people that can kind of steer you in the right direction. Similarly, if you are a minority and you're listening to this, please, please, please go ahead and check out www.theblackfemalefoundation.com and look at our business incubator coaching program. Like I said, when we created that program, it was really with the intention of addressing the things that we thought were most important to minorities in business. That mindset, that clarity, that vision is that first pillar, going into the business fundamentals, and then finally creating that community for them to thrive. So if you are a minority business owner within the first 5 years of your business and really looking to grow and thrive, then definitely give us a shout. Dr. Danelle Dixon and myself, we would love to have you. And then, I think for all the business owners out there that are already crushing it, especially despite COVID, keep crushing it in 2021,
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate having you, Dr. Martin. Thanks so much.
Thank you.